Hello. Welcome to the latest HR on the Offensive live stream. It's me, Chris Howard from Lace Partners, joined by the amazing Debbie Mitchell from our team. Debbie,
hello. Right? Yeah, very good. Thank you. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you here in our Lace boardroom, just the two of us today for today's live stream. And we're going to talk a little bit around an article which we've just seen, which actually is quite interesting because it links to something that we are just about to launch this week. So the article itself is in Raconteur, and it talks around HR and how HR is often the first to be cut when you've got organisations at times of struggle, or if they're facing challenges, or if they're looking to drive efficiency, or if they're looking at their productivity. Often as a back office function, HR tends to be one of the first that organisations look at and say, well, look, can we do this on a reduced headcount? Can we get more for less? Just a quick mini plug before I get your thoughts on it, and just some of the misconceptions around that as well. We've of course got a white paper which is going to address some of these challenges and ways in which organisations can drive more productivity without just going to the most lowest common denominator, which is just reduce headcount. It's about driving productivity. So that'll be out this week. It's called The Efficiency Paradox. Check it out and watch out for it on the Lace Partners website. But let's talk specifically around this this article, this Raconteur article. Now, you and I had a chat before we went live. So perhaps you can talk to the people watching this video a little bit around some of the common misconceptions around this. Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting. The article is kind of drawing on the fact that when organisations feel challenged, there's a need for financial readjustment, for greater efficiency, as we're seeing in organisations like Google. Recently, the government have announced civil service needs to look at this too. HR is very often kind of up there in the headlines as where can we take out costs without damaging the business? And we see that for a couple of reasons. I think there is this perception that HR is a cost centre and one that doesn't add value or doesn't bring bottom line revenue. And whilst that may be kind of, they're not obviously bringing in sales or cash to the business, there's a huge amount that HR is actually doing around productivity, around engagement, around making sure the right skills, capabilities, talent is in place to drive business success. So that misconception that we're a cost centre and not value added is really key. I think there's something that suggests we're all just about policy and following the rules, creating the rules, making sure everyone adheres to them, right? And again, it's a compliance challenge. Of course, there's a compliance role. There's lots of legislation out there which is designed to protect the people who work in our organisations, but it should really be the minimum bottom line of what you're offering to people. So we're not all about policy, but we do have to protect that kind of safety and the needs of our people. And the other one is that we're about the niceties, right? With the fluffy stuff. People love to tell you that, oh, you do all that fluffy stuff, that nice stuff, the well-being, the resilience, the mental health stuff. But actually all of that is, first of all, it's not all we do, but secondly, it's all really critical when organisations are going through massive change or difficult times, or feeling the volatilities of the economic environment as we all are right now. So it's not fluffy stuff. It's really key to kind of holding that resilience in the organisation.
Well, it's the people, isn't it? It's the people function, and it's the biggest important lever that organisations have. So I guess let's flip it into, okay, so what can HR do to be a little bit more strategic? What's the kind of the contribution that HR can have?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really key. So the first thing, we hear a lot, the phrase about HR having a seat at the table. It drives me insane. But anyway, we do hear it a lot. And it is really important that our senior leaders in the HR function are part of that kind of conversation around what is the strategy, what are our business goals, what are our drivers, where do we get our value? So our HR leaders need to understand that business context and that environment. And why the kind of get a seat at the table frustrates me is because so many of them do. And it drives me insane when we constantly see that kind of battle of HR needs to up its game, get a seat. Many of our CPOs that we talk to do have that seat at the table and are very much involved in those strategic conversations. And we need to recognise the value of that. And then, by understanding what the business is trying to achieve throughout the HR function, not just in senior leaders, we can really support. And there's a number of places where we can do that. workforce planning. So how do we make sure our workforce planning is aligned to what the business is trying to achieve? How do we then have a talent and skills strategy that allows us to make sure that we can deliver against that workforce plan? How do we manage that kind of talent supply chain within and external to our organisation? How do we make sure our leaders are really fit for the future? An old but gold phrase. We need to make sure that they understand, how to get the most out of their people, how to really optimize productivity in their teams, but also how to strategically kind of drive the business forward. And when we talk about business transformation, we really need to think about people-led business transformation. We struggle a lot with, change programs, initiatives where people are not really at the heart of that change. And as a result of that, you typically see much lower, if any, adoption. And that then is going to impact your return on investment or the real benefits you get from that transformation anyway. There's stuff around, performance. So how are organizations kind of really driving performance? And one role that we're kind of focused on a little bit here as well at the moment is that kind of critical friend. So how can the HR function, particularly at a senior level and a C-suite level, but again throughout the organization, really be kind of the critical friend, the trusted advisor, but also the conscience of the organization, so that someone is challenging and putting people first in all of those conversations, and not just from a soft, fluffy perspective, but really, what is the people impact of some of the decisions that you're making, but also how can people enable the delivery of some of those goals, those projects, those transformations, those changes that you're really trying to deliver. So I think there's a number of ways in which HR, with its existing seat at the table, how it can really kind of push and drive that people agenda that helps to achieve those goals, is not hindering and is not just a cost.
So if I just recap, just as we wrap up today, we started talking about, it's not just the lowest common denominator. We've got making those HR cuts. There is a role that HR can play. Maybe there's an element of perception that needs to be, certainly amongst some teams, that perception of driving the people agenda and having that voice at an early stage as well. Any kind of final bits just to wrap up today?
I mean, there's a couple of things for success. One is get your operating model right. I won't go into that. It's a whole other live podcast, and we've got lots of material on the LACE website about the HR operating model and building that right capability. So making sure you've got that kind of commercial acumen across your HR team, and that sort of influencing and impact to be able to be that critical friend and offer that challenge.
Lovely. Well, if you want to find out a little bit more about the white paper will be released this week. It's called The Efficiency Paradox. We've got a campaign. Debbie mentioned about talent and skills. We've got a Becoming Skills Powered campaign. She also talked about the HR operating model. We've got a campaign on those. If you just go onto the insight section of the LACE website, you can find that out. But from myself, from Debbie, thank you very much for joining us. And we're going to catch you next time on the next HR on the Offensive Live.